There are plenty of reasons to reboot a horror movie. Up-and-coming directors might be passionate for some subject matter. A producer could be looking to connect a whole new audience to an existing IP. The series might have stagnated and lost its general appeal. We see it all the time. Sometimes it's fantastic and appeals to both hardcore fans and new viewers. But sometimes a reboot can be a dumpster fire that totally misses the point. Which one of those two options is more common? Yeah. Hello horror heads, and welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host, Keegan Hughes, and today you're going to be taking a look at the top 5 worst horror movie reboots. Maybe don't bust out the popcorn for this one. Up to you. Before we get started, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more snappy startovers. Perfect, let's begin. Coming in at number 5, we've got When a Stranger Calls. Funnily enough, I recently rediscovered the trailer for this movie before diving into this script. Boy, they couldn't sell this one if they were giving away $50 bills with each ticket. Maybe it worked at the time, who knows? But it is apparent that the team behind this movie really didn't know how to scare people with the idea of a stranger making crank calls. It's a mess. The original was serviceable, and it's no bona fide classic, but it'll do in a pinch. When a Stranger Calls takes the classic tale of a crank caller calling from inside of the house and turns it into a movie. The 1979 edition of this was a pretty shameless knockoff of Halloween, but at least they did some things right. It was shot well with plenty of top-notch lighting. There's something about movies in the 70s that just make them look really, really good. The score was pretty sweet too. Add in a real killer full of spite and hate and malice, and all of a sudden you've got a decent little horror flick. Sure, all the characters were lame and fluffy, and the detective is a pretty obvious Sam Loomis ripoff, but hey, when the remake rolled around, horror looked a little different. This might be controversial to say, but horror movies in the 2000s were lacking something. Something about the style at the time made them all feel very samey and goofy. Sure, some were good, but that decade is bloated with bland, unstylish offerings. When a Stranger Calls is no exception. It literally does nothing fun with the concept, like nothing at all. The main character is a walking mannequin and the kids are just kids. Instead of building tension and making a villain that's actually scary, they just decided to shoehorn in a bunch of jump scares. The telephone rings, jump scare. The trees are moving, jump scare. The lights come on, jump scare. It wears very thin, very quickly, and offers nothing to fill the void. I don't know what they were going for with this one, but it's obvious they didn't make it work. Coming in at number 4, we've got Carnival of Souls. Leave cult content alone, please. We don't need any remakes of stuff that wasn't commercially successful in the first place. Keep cashing in on the sequels and the blockbusters and let the rare classics be. The original Carnival of Souls was largely ignored on release. It didn't do so well at the box office and then faded into obscurity for years. Somehow it regained popularity in the 80s and became an art house hit. People would flock to screenings around Halloween time and the rest is history. It's creepy, measured, and foreboding, and absolutely brimming with terrifying atmosphere. It makes use of a lot of stylistic techniques reminiscent of film noir, which really elevates the spooky vibe. The story is that of a woman whose life is turned upside down by a car accident. She opts to move to a new city and try to salvage some semblance of herself, but it turns out to be quite difficult to socialize and make friends. Soon she's drawn to an old carnival and things start getting weird. Ghouls stalk the night and terrorize this poor woman, and at all times it's difficult to tell fantasy from reality. All in all, it's a very effective and haunting experience. But the remake? It goofs it all up. The Wes Craven-produced disaster doesn't have a clue what made the original effective. I don't know why they decided to take this route, but they did. There really isn't much connecting the original and the remake other than the name. 1998's Carnival of Souls features an undead clown, a boring repetitive plot, a bunch of tasteless dreck, and none of the atmosphere from the original. There's even a time skip event where a woman witnesses a clown assaulting her mother, and then all of a sudden it's 20 years later and the clown is back. This could have been an entirely different movie, but for some reason the folks behind it wanted to tie it to the original underground hit. Come on, guys. Coming in at number 3, we've got Friday the 13th. See, if they had done a better job rebooting this, we'd probably have more Jason. At least that's what I tell myself. Maybe the appetite for classic franchise villains has calmed down a little over the past decade. Who knows? But what I do know is that this 2009 remake is tepid compared to the smorgasbord of films that came before it. It's true, Jason was due for a reboot. After decades of sequels, each more insane and out there than the last, Friday the 13th needed to return to its roots. Camp Crystal Lake, some teens, some slashing, what could be better? And how do you mess that up? By overreaching, apparently. To be fair, it would be very difficult to reintroduce a classic figure like Jason to an entirely new generation of horror fans. Tastes have changed, consumption is different, and breathing fresh life into old symbols is tough. People who didn't grow up with Freddy, Jason, and Michael vaguely know who they are, but unless they've put some time and effort into research, they're not going to feel attached to them. Jason is especially tough as a lot of his iconography came from movies further down the road. His mask didn't even show up until part 3. So how do you bring a character so well known for his accessories from multiple flicks into a new rebooted from the start movie? Well, you smush 4 movies into one, of course. Friday the 13th, 2009 features a record amount of flashbacks, exposition, and groups of young folks to murder. In fact, there's so much content packed in here, it's almost impossible to care about any of it. It's tough to bring everything together, especially after years of myth making, but man, this movie is bloated. Coming in at number 2, we've got The Haunting. There are so many adaptations of Shirley Jackson's famous novel, The Haunting of Hill House. Vincent Price made an excellent movie with the same title back in '59. It still holds up by all accounts. Then in 1963, Robert Wise made another outstanding film featuring the very same story. Differently done, of course, but haunting just the same. These tales thrive on psychological storytelling. They don't make anything explicitly obvious, and many of the scares come as a result of a slow burn. Because of this measured strategy, these movies are considered to be all-time greats. People still revisit them today and find new things to appreciate. It's too bad that the 1999 remake couldn't capture really any of what made these movies and the original novel so deeply affecting. The Haunting remake is just so long and drawn out. There are some qualities worth mentioning, like the design of the house itself and the cinematography, but that's where the positives end. It, for whatever reason, decides to forego the slow and spooky pace of its predecessors and instead opt for weird, high-octane scares. There's a pendulum beheading, a skeleton jumps out of a fireplace, loud noises. And don't get me started on the CGI. Digital effects were nowhere near as polished as they are today, and The Haunting definitely suffers for it. Effects are overused and underwhelming, at times even being laughable. The earlier renditions are proof that you don't need all this bombastic schlock to make a horror movie scary, but the director here decided to ignore all of that. If you want a modern reimagining, just go watch the Netflix series. And finally, at number 1, Carrie, the bargain bin legend. I found a copy of this remake at the dollar store a while ago. I didn't know that big budget Hollywood movies with recognizable actors could end up there, but there it was. The folks behind this reboot went in with the best of intentions, I'm sure, but they just couldn't pull it off. Does anyone remember the viral marketing campaign they did for this one? They really tried to get people hyped up, but it fizzled. How are you going to measure up against the original? It's just such an iconic movie at this point, it should be considered forever untouchable. So much went right back in '76. Sissy Spacek is the perfect Carrie. The cinematography is top-notch, and pacing is tight, and the soundtrack is haunting. The timing was perfect too, the story just fits in the '70s. The 2013 remake never had a chance. It tries too hard to modernize the tale and falls flat. Chloe Grace Moretz just isn't the right fit for Carrie, and to top it all off, it's just sort of boring. We spend so much time with side characters, making sure that we know them intimately, and too little time with what people actually want to see, which is Carrie being Carrie. It was a valiant effort to bring the oft-referenced flick to modern eyes, but really we should just be watching and rewatching the original. Makes you just want to ban all reboots for a little while, eh? Maybe I'm just being a jerk. It's not the first time it's happened. What do you think of the list? Do you agree with my picks? What reboot gives you the chills every time you think about it? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more gregarious ones from the top 5 internet urban legends that came true. Open Eyes says, "Tiny teeth on your taint" sounds like the name of a good 90s punk band. I don't know, it sounds more like a hit single to me. I think I'd call the band the Toilet Rats. Blair Cassidy Faust says, "Don't you just hate it when you try to position a corpse and it breaks? Me too, right? Ugh, but look at us and our first world murder problems." Michael Langford says, "I'm related to Elmer McCurdy on my mama's side." No kidding. Do you have any claim to the mummified corpse? Count Siku says, "These top 5 lists are not what I expected from this Chanel. I am totally uninterested." I am just so sorry that you clicked on a top 5 scary video and got a top 5 scary list. I'll have a chat with management and see if I can get you a refund. And Matthew Congdon says, "Skittles!" Sour only, please and thank you. That's all the time we have for today. Before I challenge Prince Jamroll to a duel, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more outlandish operations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.